Welcome to this week's edition of Michael's Corner. I'm your host, Michael Sanders. First of all, before we even go anywhere, I want to thank all the veterans who served in the armed forces in order to keep our country safe for its citizens. I hope you all had a great Memorial Day. Now, it's going to be an interesting day because we're talking about voting, the right to vote, landmine. And of course, there's something hot button about this, which I will get to in a second. But first, let's start with some basics. Now, in order to vote in this country, you must be a U.S. citizen who will be 18 years old by election day. You must meet your state's residency requirements. And then the people who cannot vote are non-citizens, including permanent legal residents, some people with felony convictions, which of course vary by states, and mentally incapacitated individuals, which also varies by states. That's basically a brief about who can and who cannot vote. Okay, now what we're talking about, which is the hot button issue for this week, is the Electoral College. Now, I've heard all kinds of talk on all different directions about good, bad, all the things about the electoral system. Personally, it's got a lot of quirks. Now, let me talk about it now briefly. The Electoral College consists of 538 electors, of which 270 are required to win the presidency. Now, this system was created in 1787 as a compromise between electoral and popular votes. The purpose of the system was to balance all the interests between the high population and low population states. Now, there are another reason, which I'll go into a little later, is it was also a way for people to get an equal voice when they started voting, because in this time, we're talking about 1700s, early 1800s, there was still a lot of folks that were illiterate that couldn't read or write. And so this was kind of a system that would allow everybody to vote, regardless of whatever your educational background was, because you had people representing you in each state. Now, this Electoral College was called into question twice of interest. Now, the first one was in 2016, the presidential election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. I know everybody remembered all the controversy with that, because what it was is Republican Donald Trump secured the presidency with the Electoral College, while Hillary Clinton had a narrow margin of victory in the popular vote. Now, if you look at that, in the popular vote, if we were to go by straight popular vote, Hillary Clinton should have been declared the winner, but she wasn't because of the Electoral College. Now, this also happened in 1876, the election of 1876. Now, this one was even worse because it was the same situation. You had a Rutherford, let me correct myself, Rutherford B. Hayes won from the electoral vote as opposed to the popular vote against the Democrat Samuel J. Tilden. Okay? Now, in this situation, it's the same. Tilden should have won based on popular vote. Now, I'm not picking sides or parties here, but people felt Tilden was the better fit at the time, and they felt in 2016 that Hillary Clinton was the better fit at the time. But they couldn't have their way because the popular vote isn't what votes the presidency in. It's the Electoral College that votes them in. Now, that particular election, the 1876 one, almost plunged the United States into a second civil war. As if we didn't have enough war back then, right? Now, I have to ask the question, and I know a lot of people do, is the Electoral College really needed in modern times? Okay? Well, one of the arguments that created it in the first place was that people, as I said earlier, were not informed or intelligent enough to elect a president. For this, they needed people to vote for them. This may have been true in 1780 when people were uninformed because of distance and how hard getting word from one part of the country to another was. But in modern times, everyone is generally well informed, and so that argument has basically been declared null and void. It's not really applicable or an issue anymore. Now, in the day, they created the 12th Amendment, which was created to balance this confusion by designating that each party, whatever political party happens to be in powers at the time and who have the presidents, could only field one presidential candidate and one vice presidential candidate. Now, this did work for a while, but as can be seen in the 2016 election and again in the 1876 election, there are flaws in the system. Now, to answer the question I posed earlier about would it be good to get rid of the Electoral College? Well, in order to do that, it would require a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College, which would be unlikely because it would be too hard to get a majority which would be needed to pass that. Because of the difficulty of such a move, they just couldn't do it. But a compact of states in recent times are started to work together to allocate all of their electoral votes to the winner of the popular vote. Now, this is what the position I support. Because let's face it, everything's about popularity these days. If someone wants to find out whether a candidate's good or bad, just look at the Freedom of Information Act that we have in this country. Because of this, you can find all you need to know about whether a candidate's good or bad. You can look at their political history, what they've done wrong, how they voted in different constitutional amendments and different, meetings of the Congress and that. So basically what it ends up being these days, usually the wisest thing is to vote for the lesser of two evils. I know it's kind of weird, but that's kind of how I kind of look at it. And it really should be about voting your conscience these days and not along party lines, which unfortunately is how things are done these days. As a side note, regardless of whatever candidates are running, okay, if you don't exercise your right to vote, you have no right to complain. If the one you wanted to win doesn't win, because if you didn't vote, you get what you voted for or not voted for. So you have no reason to complain if you didn't vote, for somebody and they got into office or the other person got into the office. Now, to reiterate what I said earlier, I support the popular vote and I believe the Electoral College should be eliminated. It is an outdated system that has no place in the modern election process. That's my soapbox for the day. I hope this, provokes some thought on your parts of you folks out there. And if you have any questions about it or you have an opinion about it, we'll get to this a little bit later. But for the moment, I'm going to move on to the next section. I will see you guys in a minute. Bye-bye now. Welcome back. This is the questions and answers section of Michael's Corner. Glad to see you guys are still with me. Now, as is customary for this part of the show, I have a question for you guys. Okay? Do you believe that the electoral system is an antiquated system that should be removed from our popular voting system of today? Is the popular vote effective enough to elect a president without having to worry about whether they can get the Electoral College votes or not? After all, governors get elected by popular vote, mayors get elected by popular vote, senators and representatives get elected by popular vote. Why not the president? If you have any other questions or thoughts about it, let me know in the comments. But that's basically my question. With all the multimedia that we have out there today, I think that the popular vote is probably what we should keep, and we should lose the electoral vote. That's it for my question and answer section. I will see you guys in just a second for my final thoughts. Bye-bye now. Welcome to Final Thoughts. Glad you guys stuck with us. I hope you had an enjoyable time like I did. It was more fun doing this research than a lot of them because just a lot of things going on with the votes these days. In review, we talked about the right to vote, who can, who cannot. We also talked about the Electoral College versus the popular vote. I also talked about the fact that I don't think the Electoral College is necessary in today's modern voting systems. It's just an antiquated system that had its time and that needs to go away. I also mentioned that multimedia is a really good way to get to know candidates these days. Now you can look up information about anything you want to know about a candidate. So, being uninformed is a non-issue. I also said that, with the right to vote comes basically the right to vote. If you don't vote and you get a candidate in that you don't like, well, you didn't vote. So you have nothing to say about it. Now, in the show, I hope I covered all the stuff you needed to know about the Electoral College and the right to vote. If I left out anything, please let me know in the comments, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Next week, we're talking about employment. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because now we're at a point where the COVID-19 has died down, people are getting their shots, and there's more jobs are becoming available, and a lot of people are getting back to work. So I'm going to do a show about employment, how it is today, what's available, what we can do about it, general information like that. With that being said, I want you guys to be safe, be careful, be open-minded, and I'll see you guys in my next show. Have a great day. Bye-bye.